let's jump right into this explainer. Imagine waking up one day and your entire world is literally spinning. For millions facing a sudden vestibular diagnosis, it feels like an invisible storm. On the outside, you look perfectly fine, but on the inside, it's chaos. Today, we're diving deep into the journey of living a life rebalanced, and we're going to spotlight the incredible people fighting tooth and nail to get their lives back.
We've got to start by validating just how terrifying this diagnosis actually is. Look at this devastating post from an 18-year-old who was just diagnosed with Meniere's disease. They wrote, "I feel like I'm on borrowed time with my music. All I can see is deafness, shrill ringing, and vertigo." If you or someone you love has a vestibular disorder, you know exactly what that panic feels like, right? The intense grief over the future you thought you had. It is a profoundly heavy burden.
So, this brings us to the question that haunts pretty much everyone at the very beginning of this journey. Is life really over after a vestibular diagnosis? It's a dark, isolated place to be in. But in this explainer, we're going to show you how that overwhelming urge to give up can actually be powerfully reframed into adapting. We'll look at the science, the medical strategies, and most importantly, some truly uplifting stories of resilience from people who walked this exact path and found the light on the other side.
Now, let's peek under the hood for a second. Deep within the inner ear, we have these incredibly delicate hidden structures, the labyrinth and the cochlea. Think of it as this tiny, fragile control center that manages sound, pressure changes, and even the speed and direction of your movement. When this highly sensitive network gets disrupted or goes offline, the physical and emotional ripple effects on your entire body are frankly massive. At the core of a lot of these terrifying symptoms is something called endolymphatic hydrops. Basically, excess fluid builds up, presses on the nerves, and essentially shorts out the cells that detect sound and balance. This mechanical fluid buildup is the hidden culprit behind those sudden vertigo attacks, the wildly fluctuating hearing loss, that intense ringing, and that awful feeling of pressure in the ear. It can happen completely out of the blue, which is a primary theory behind Meniere's disease, or it can pop up secondary to trauma or another illness. And you know, this disease is notoriously tricky. Recent data published in Acta Otolaryngologica shows that for patients with unilateral Meniere's, meaning it starts in just one ear, that same fluid buildup eventually hits the opposite ear nearly a quarter of the time, 24.2% to be exact, and it's highly correlated with how long you've had the disease. So what does this tell us? It tells us that managing a vestibular disorder isn't a quick fix. It requires long-term vigilance. That's why having a proactive strategy is absolutely crucial. The game changer here is taking back control. Veteran patients will tell you that fighting back means proactively managing your lifestyle triggers. Check out this toolkit for balance. Implementing a strict low-sodium diet is practically foundational for reducing that inner ear fluid. We're also talking about cutting back on caffeine, dropping the alcohol and smoking, aggressively managing your daily stress, and staying incredibly well hydrated. Oh, and dodging trigger foods like MSG and dairy, that can make a massive difference. These everyday proactive adjustments are what truly foster long-term recovery. Now, those lifestyle changes build right into an actionable medical toolkit, and finding the right specialist here can literally unlock life-changing therapies. Step 1, you've got to find a specialized neurootologist, not just a general doctor. Step 2 involves targeted medications. Many folks find immense relief using diuretics or a compound called betahistine. Step 3 is jumping into vestibular rehabilitation therapy to physically retrain your brain's balance centers. And if symptoms are still severe, Step 4 brings in options like steroid injections or specialized surgeries. All right, let's pivot from the clinical facts to the human triumphs, because honestly, the medical path only tells half the story. The other half is the sheer power of the human spirit. We're going to introduce you to some incredible individuals from the Vestibular Disorders Association community. These are people who looked fear, anxiety, and isolation right in the face and said, "You are not going to define me." First up is Diane Worthy. She's a classical violinist who developed secondary endolymphatic hydrops, and she faced the agonizing prospect of losing her entire music career to distorted hearing. I mean, imagine your whole livelihood and passion relying on your ears, and suddenly you're hearing double pitches, dealing with constant pain, and a sudden aversion to loud noises. It was an absolute career-threatening crisis that nearly pushed her into a deep depression. But she didn't give up. Instead, Diane became a fierce advocate for her own health. She took proactive control by adopting a strict American Heart Association low-sodium diet to relieve the pressure on her cranial nerves. She used steroids to knock down the inflammation, and she got custom-fitted musicians' earplugs to manage decibel levels.
And you know what? She's still successfully playing and teaching. She is living proof that with diligent treatment, you can hold on to the things you love most.
Then there's Nicole Cure. She's a Colombian-American artist who was suddenly struck by hearing loss and really intense vestibular symptoms. Much like Diane, Nicole was plunged into this terrifying sensory shift and was eventually diagnosed with secondary endolymphatic hydrops. But what she actually chose to do with that devastating experience is nothing short of breathtaking.
Nicole beautifully adapted by channeling her terrifying sensory experiences into these vibrant, supernova-inspired art pieces that raise international awareness. She launched a signature series called The Colors of Sound. Through these fluid abstract paintings, she illustrates her internal experience with sound and color. She literally took an invisible, isolating illness and translated it into visual masterpieces. Now, she partners with organizations to donate her art for fundraising, turning her deepest struggle into a beacon of hope for others.
And you have to consider the sheer grit of Steve Schweier. Diagnosed with Meniere's in 2013, the debilitating nature of the disease meant Steve spent years stuck on the couch, barely able to do more than rest and endure. But eventually he hit a breaking point. He decided he'd had enough and simply refused to let the disease dictate the terms of his existence. So he set out on a journey that most completely healthy people wouldn't even dare to attempt. Steve literally rode an e-bike across America, traveling 1,400 miles from Denver, Colorado, all the way to Columbus, Ohio. He chronicled this grueling ride in his memoir, On the Vertigo, facing his illness with humor, grace, and immense physical grit. Along the way, he raised over $10,000 for Meniere's research. He became a voice for a silent minority, proving that even when your balance system is completely failing you, your willpower can still propel you forward.
So the crucial point we keep seeing here is the mental shift. It's moving from feeling like a victim on borrowed time to embracing the empowering reality of what we call the new normal. Look, it is incredibly valid to mourn the life you had before the dizziness started. But as these warriors show us, staying stuck in that isolation, that's a choice. You can pivot. You can choose adaptation. You can actively pursue your treatment, tweak your lifestyle, and discover entirely new passions that fit your rebalanced life.
And this hope is everywhere. Even scrolling through the Reddit community, we see warriors actively sharing their success stories with treatments like betahistine, proving that long-term recovery really is possible. Remember that terrified 18-year-old from the beginning of our explainer? Well, in those exact same forums, you'll find users like this one who pushed to see a neuroautoologist, got on the right medical protocol, and successfully reversed their symptoms. They jump online not to complain, but to throw a lifeline to those who are newly diagnosed. Which brilliantly illustrates exactly why finding your community is so vital. You do not have to navigate this dark tunnel all by yourself when there are incredible networks ready to catch you. Whether that means tapping into the massive resources at the Vestibular Disorders Association, joining a Life on the Level support group, tuning into Johan's Vestibular Talks channel on YouTube, or just connecting on Reddit and Facebook. Finding your tribe changes everything. It validates your invisible pain and it crowdsources real, actionable solutions.
The ultimate takeaway from these amazing warriors is a resounding message of resilience and hope for anyone facing the darkness of a chronic illness. Having an invisible illness means people out in the world often expect you to function normally, even when you feel like you're trying to walk on a turbulent ship in the pitch black. But the Vestibular Warrior community wants you to know this absolute truth. You are seen, your struggle is valid, and absolutely, without a doubt, you are not alone.
So, armed with this knowledge and the inspiration of a community that truly understands your struggle, how are you going to take control of your own journey today? What is your next step toward a life rebalanced? Will you schedule that appointment with a specialist? Will you commit to a new dietary routine? Or, hey, maybe you'll just reach out online and say hello to a fellow warrior. Whatever it is, take that step today. Your life isn't over. It's just waiting to be rebalanced.